Hey everybody, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you might be joining us from in the world today. My name is Meg Alexander. I am, as always, honored and excited to get to host another Power to Fly Chat and Learn virtual event. Now, before we dive in to today's event, I want to say a quick hello and go over some housekeeping items. This will be especially important if today is your first event with Power to Fly. And if that's the case, then hi, welcome. I'm so happy to meet you. Now, the love is no less real for my frequent flyers. Thank you to everyone, all of our familiar names and faces and avatars in the chat. I love seeing y'all when I tune in here each day. So thank you all so much for that. Now, as we go through today's event, whether today, this is your first Power to Fly event or your 50th, the big thing to know about our events is we want to encourage participation. We're here to make sure that the time that you spend with Power to Fly and great companies like Woken is useful and is that you're glad for the time that you spend with us. So to that end, I very much encourage you to turn your cameras on if you'd like to. There is no pressure to be Instagram perfect. I think I've got like 4 pounds of dry shampoo in this hair right now. So truly, y'all, we don't care if you're coming to us from your living room couch or a corner office, three-piece suit or your bathrobe makes no difference to us. All right. We just want to meet you where you are. Now, if you want to participate in other ways without your using your camera, that's fine. It's not a requirement at all. You can always dive into the chat and let us know, and get in your participation that way. Please feel free to ask questions. If you want us to dive in deeper on a subject that we're talking about, please feel free. And we'll talk a little bit more about the chat feature in a minute. Now, we are recording today's event. And what that means for all of you is you don't have to take notes. Now, you can just sit back, relax, enjoy the conversation that I'm about to have with Rachel, and not worry if you missed a resource that was listed or a link that was shared. So, what's going to happen is in about 4 to 5 business days, we're going to email everybody that registered for today's event, whether you joined us or not. And we were going to send y'all an email with a link to where you can rewatch this recording when we post it on powertofly.com. Now, let's say that Rachel shares something just like mind-blowing, paradigm shifting, and you don't want to wait 4 to 5 business days to rewatch or to send it out or share it with a friend or coworker or a relative. You don't have to. You can always head over to our YouTube channel. Hi, YouTube, where we are live streaming currently. I'll be sharing links for all of this in the chat thread as we go. Just give me a second to get through our intro. And I'll share links for all of this. But like I said, you can check out our YouTube channel. You are welcome to look at some of our past videos. A lot of our best of and kind of favorite chats are housed there. So I definitely recommend you check out our YouTube channel. But the full resource list, all of our just mega library of resources for all of you is on powertofly.com. So I very much recommend you check out our site as well. Now, please feel free to ask questions. Dive on into that chat. Y'all aren't going to be able to come off mute today, but we want to hear from you. So please feel free to dive into that chat and let me know where you're joining us from. I'm coming to you from Toledo, Ohio. This is land that belonged to the Fox, Kickapoo, and Potawatomi tribes in my area. If you're at all familiar with Michigan or the Midwest, if that's Michigan, I'm about right there. So please feel free, let us know where you're joining us from. If you know, please, you're welcome to share whose land you're on. And I'm always really eager to see how far our global audience spreads. So let's see what we got here. Oh, okay. So Rachel's coming to you from NYC. We've got Melinda is coming to us from Atlanta, Georgia. Hi, Melinda. Let's see. We've got Ria, who's also out of Ohio, same as me. Ooh, Nana is here from Calgary, Alberta. Thank you so much for joining us. All right, now please feel free to keep that chat active and hopping. You are welcome to ask questions, dive in deeper, network with your fellow attendees. I will just refer you very quickly to the code of conduct. This looks like a lot of scary stuff, but basically what it boils down to is just don't act like a jerk, okay? Operate from a place of kindness and respect, and it's pretty hard to go wrong from there. If you want details on this, please feel free to message us. I wrote it, so I can tell you exactly what it says. But just play nice, y'all. That's pretty much all we ask. All right, now, in case y'all have never heard of or have not gotten to the great honor of sitting through a chat with Rachel, Rachel Serwetz is here today on behalf of Woken, and I'll explain to you a little bit more about the business, what they do, and who she is in relation to it in a moment. But this page that you're looking at right now with the QR code is going to lead you to Woken's company page. I think it's on Power to Fly, or it might be leading to a different place, but it's leading to a place where you can get more info on Woken. And we'll be sharing links through the chat the entire time during the event, so that way y'all can check out other great content from Rachel and learn a little bit more about what Woken could do for you. Now, we got more people chiming in. Shruti's coming to us from Oregon. We've got Alina from NYC, Sylvia from NorCal, who's on Ohlone and Irgun Indian land. Love it, y'all. Thank you for sharing. All right. So if anything that we say today or that Rachel says today, kind of piques your interest, do not forget to take a look at Woken for the career resources that Rachel can provide. Now, this is the woman of the hour, Rachel Serwetz. Now, Rachel is like I said, CEO, founder, and career coach at Woken. Now, her early professional experience was at Goldman Sachs in operations. She also worked at Bridgewater Associates in HR. Now, from there, Rachel was trained as a coach at NYU. And then that's when she became a certified coach through the International Coach Federation. After this, she worked in HR research at Aon Hewitt, and then attained her technology MBA at NYU Stern. Now, throughout her career, Rachel has helped hundreds of professionals with career exploration, and for the past few years, she's been building her company, Woken. Now, Woken is an online career exploration platform to coach professionals through the process of clarifying your ideal job and career path. She has served as an adjunct professor of entrepreneurship at Binghamton University, as well as a career coach through the Flatiron School / WeWork, Columbia University, and Project Activate. I'm really excited to introduce y'all to Woken and share some more links of how you can check out Rachel and her amazing company. Rachel, before we dive into questions, what else should our audience members know about you today?
I think that was a great summary so far, but you'll hear a lot more in a minute of all my juiciest thoughts. So we can dive in.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, we're here today to talk about career clarity. What is it, and do you have it? So I'm going to turn the floor over to Rachel to start. But if you all have questions at any time, please feel free to ask. I'll be in the chat thread the entire time. So Rachel, take it away.
Righty, and I have my chat in front of me as well. Okay. All righty, let's just dive in. You already know who I am. I'm going to breeze over this agenda as well. I like to start with a little bit of context. And the reason I do that is just so you don't feel alone. When you're thinking about career clarity or feeling engaged or aligned with your career path, many and most professionals may not feel that sense of alignment yet. And so I just like to give that bigger picture so you don't feel like it's all on you, right? It's sort of a systematic issue that we may never have had the right resources in figuring things out from the beginning, right? And so a majority of employees are disengaged at work. This has to do with whether we're feeling like we're thriving, right? So your engagement at work actually impacts your personal life, at large. We want to find our work meaningful. And we want to be in roles that are aligned with our personality and our strengths. And oftentimes that may not be the case. But again, we're going to talk about how to get there. And again, this is not just you. There's reasons why you may not have had the right tools or support to figure this out. And so we're going to get really clear in identifying your best fit role, industry, and work environment. And that's how you're going to get a little more specific as to where you feel like your career needs a little improvement. This is just another kind of bonus piece of just some patterns. I added this in recently, just synthesizing all the things I've seen in so many years. Again, I do this so you don't feel alone, right? These patterns are common and they're still frustrating challenges. But I just kind of want to show you what's happening in the big picture, right? So a lot of people enter into job search and they don't know what job they want. But they're pursuing that job search anyway, right? So I'm here to sort of educate you on what can I do before I start applying to any job and what's going to really help me be strategic. A lot of times people know they're not in the right fitting job or career path, but they don't know how to figure out what that path should be, right? And that's exactly why we're here. The job boards, this is a little more of a job search trend, but just applying is just sort of not working and never really worked. It's just getting worse. And so we are here, people like myself, to educate you on how to navigate these systems, how to get around them, and how to really just be educated on what's going to work the best for you to get your foot in the door to identify opportunities. And what are those unique activities to do beyond just applying online? And in job search, when you're pursuing a path you're not in love with, it actually doesn't really help, right? We want you to show up to those interviews having energy and really feeling engaged with what it is you're talking about. So it does go hand in hand, feeling like you're in the right path and succeeding and being efficient with your job search and even promotions and career growth at large. It all goes hand in hand. Networking is sort of the last piece. I think a lot of people struggle with networking, and it's such a critical component to career exploration and job searching. So that's another common trend that I'm seeing. Again, I just give you all this just so you know that if you're feeling any of these things, you're not alone. We're going to tackle a lot of these things today. But this is just some of those, many common things that I see. So why is it so important to find a job that you feel aligned with? Number one, personally, you are going to feel better physically and mentally, right? There's studies on sleepwalking through a career, having a purpose gap. And on the flip side, if you do feel that alignment, you're going to feel relieved and excited, right? And so we want you to be focusing your energy on advancing along your journey versus questioning which journey should I be on, right? So that's where it really can just impact when you have that clarity, when you have that certainty, you can really focus on your growth versus, questioning where you belong. Even wealth potential studies do show that when you're engaged at work, you are actually going to reap more success from that. Okay. It makes job search more efficient, right? So you want to identify the right people, the right opportunities that make sense for you, and you want to be effective in the interviews once you get there. So it does really amp up your job search. And it just ramps up your career growth at large, right? It makes it easier when you're in a role or a team or a company where it's really the right fit for you. Growing from there should feel so much more organic at that point, because you're seeing, the windows of opportunity when you're already in a great seat. What else could come next? And it feels much easier to find that growth and promotion. And productivity, right? We need people to be in the right jobs so that they're solving all these important problems out there in the world. And we need your most productive self. We need your most impactful, innovative self. And you will be that person, right? If you're in a job that really suits you and your best abilities. So please feel free to share in the chat why you feel job alignment is important for you, whether it's in general or maybe right now something you're really feeling. But if any of this is resonating and kind of why you really want to feel that sense of work alignment, do let us know. And I'll let people trickle into the chat, but I'll keep going, but feel free to kind of reflect and share if you're willing. I'm going to go through a few common limiting beliefs and try to reframe them for you. Okay. So the first one is stress, right? And stress is, it's basically a signal to ourselves that like we feel that this goal or task is really important, which is fine. But when you're feeling the sense of stress, I always say like hands off keys, right? Because when you're feeling that stress, what is it that we do? We open up the job boards. And so what I want you to do is next time you're feeling that moment of stress, try to apply a little structure, a little bit more methodical nature of saying, you know what, I got to clarify my path, or I want to build my network, or I want to identify open roles, or whatever your goal is. What are the steps I can take to get there versus my immediate gut reaction of like, let me just go apply to anything? May or may not be the right action to take that best serves you in meeting that goal. So, really allow yourself to figure out that process to getting where you want to go. Security, right? We need a job to take care of our lives, and that's well and good and it's important. But I would combine that with your interest in the path and your alignment with the path. I see some people who they're sort of saying, this job is really hot right now and, I should go after it. It's very in demand. But if you hate that path or you hate those skills or you're not good at it, it's not going to be so secure in the end of the day. So we can't ignore the fact that we are human and we have strengths, we have weaknesses, we have interests, and we need to think about those things and what path is secure. So you're going to think about all of it. A lot of people tell themselves, I can't do something, right? If you're trying to make a pivot or anything like that, always just be informed when you make decisions. A lot of people make decisions based on either a lack of information or even assumptions or emotions. So you just want to make sure that you really learn, how do people pivot into this path? How do people break in? Who gets hired? What skill level is required? And really just have all the data you need to make good decisions about what you want, what you don't want, what's feasible, what's not feasible, all that good stuff. the past, right? So a lot of people say, you know what, I've only ever done this. That's all I can ever go do. Your story is so much more important than just like what you've done. So you want to make sense of the story for other people. Your background, your strengths, your direction, how does that all tie together? If you make that obvious for somebody else, even in writing on your resume or on your LinkedIn, as well as verbally, then it's just going to become so much easier for people to understand where you're going and why your background sets you up to do that. Okay. So don't hold yourself back based on what you've done, only what you've done, right? If it's not what you want to go do long term. A lot of people say, what do I want to be in decades from now? And then how do I reverse engineer it? I like to focus on the short term, right? In the sense of what role would be amazing for you right now and where could it lead? Like about a 70-30, like short term versus long term, in the sense that if you understand the current or the next role title, what are the pathways it could set me up to do? That's usually enough of, you're setting yourself up to say, okay, I enjoy the idea of some of those. I don't exactly know which path I'll take, but I understand where I could take this or where people might typically take this role in the future, right? And the reason I don't focus so much on long term is because you don't know who you're going to be, you don't know where these industries are going to go. And so really just focusing on what would be the best fit right now and then like sort of organically see where that leads is usually a nice way to do it. A lot of people tell me I'm open to any role, I'm open to any industry. And to me, that's like kind of one of my biggest, I don't want to say red flags, but I'm always hearing things, it triggers feelings for me because if you're too open, it sort of tells me you're not sure what it is you want or what is the best fit for you. So I always say be picky, right? You want to, really be focused and clear as to what is the best fit for you. And so another way I like to say it is being narrow and wide. Narrow in your focus. Okay, this role makes the most sense. This industry makes the most sense. And wide in the sense of, okay, where do I go find more people or more teams or more companies that are doing the work I'm interested in? So don't feel that limiting your direction is going to limit the number of opportunities, right? There's a difference between the volume versus here's the path that actually makes sense for me. Okay. Aware. So we're often just not aware of all the different roles going on out there. And there's over 160,000 unique roles in the US alone. Doesn't mean you have to, learn every single one, but it's okay to say, I'm not sure, right? Especially if you're networking, you could say, I'm debating role A, B, and C. And they may say, oh, I have a few introductions I can make for you. So, let other people meet you where you're at and meet yourself where you're at, right? Don't feel forced to have it all figured out when you show up to a party and somebody says, what are you doing? What are you working on? And we always feel like we have to have all the answers. But, being honest is actually way better because then they're going to help you. Actually, they might be able to help you with what it is you're really looking into. Interviewing well. A lot of people think like, interviewing, of course we want to do well, but you don't want to shape shift into like who they need you to be. You want to think about who do I want to converse with and about what? And that's going to help you sort of reverse engineer into say, okay, what should I apply to and what teams should I try to go meet with? What work areas do I really want to contribute towards and be involved with? And just remember that these interviews it's a real job and a real team and a real company with real customers and a real product. And so don't just like check the box and just say what it is you think they want to hear from you. Really try to reverse it and say, what conversation should I even be in the first place? Applying, we sort of touched on this a little, but people are just constantly applying. And, we want you to be exploring, right? Especially if you're in job search, I like to just reframe it entirely like career advancement, career development, career exploration. When you sort of give it a new name, you don't feel like, oh, I'm searching, I'm in need of. You're saying, how do I grow? How do I advance myself? How do I build my network, build my brand, build up my skills, and do all these things that may lead to opportunities versus I'm sitting here on the job boards all day, every day. A lot of times we look at other people around us, and that's, pretty normal. We're human, it happens, but I always say keep your eyes on your own paper. And, if somebody can provide you information or inspiration, great, we keep them. If not, unfollow, right? And just try not to fall down the rabbit hole of, comparing yourself and just really if you're seeing somebody's profile that you admire, ask yourself, how can I move myself one step forward, either to be like them or to follow their success or even to learn from them? Can I set up a meeting with that person, right? So always just try to make it one step forward of what would be the most constructive next step for you. And fear, it's totally normal. I always say turn fear into learning. So if you have doubts, if you have hesitations, if you have concerns about something, those are actually useful signals to yourself that you need more information. So turn those doubts into questions, turn the questions into answers and information, and that information becomes strategies and ways forward. You may say, you know what, I learned a lot about this path. It's actually not the right fit for me. Or I learned a lot about this path and it definitely is the right fit for me. So just use those icky, sticky moments as opportunities to actually move yourself forward. They are signals of, what you're craving and what you're not sure about and what you need more of. And so, they can actually be a useful tool. I'm seeing the chat a little bit. Carving out time to figure it out is very challenging. Yes. Well, Sylvia, I mean, we don't touch a ton in this deck in particular about accountability. But Meg, please feel free to bring this back up to me later because, we've got other resources, making the time to do all of this is absolutely another question. And actually I do have a slide at the end, a little bit about that, but, Sylvia, what I would think about is, do you want to, it could be 30 minutes a week. But really the question is, if I'm sitting here doing job search, should I be doing job search or should I be doing career exploration? And what makes sense to do before the next, right? And having clarity of your path first before you start applying. So, just think about any time you're about to spend on your career development anyway. And then, where should that time be best spent? But there's like so much I could think about with accountability. It's an important topic of how do we even get this all done? Karina's mentioning her pivot, getting a sense of her story has been challenged, takes time, but I know it's critical to finding a job that will be a fit. Yeah, Karina, absolutely. And with the story, again, there's different pieces. It's like, how do you synthesize your background, your strengths, and also your direction? So whenever you're thinking about your story, I would break it down into those three parts. And again, finding the answers is a whole other story. But just trying to give yourself a framework of, what should I be saying in this story, right? Sheer number of roles is overwhelming. Absolutely. With that, and I'm seeing Alina said same role. I realize there's so many roles I could pivot into. Yeah. So again, a little bit of learning goes a long way. You don't have to learn about every single role that's out there. But what you want to do is try to understand yourself and pick a bit of a short list of the roles that you think might be sort of a good starting point to look into. And then it's sort of going to evolve from there when you keep learning. You might, see what else arises along your learning journey, but just have a starting point of some roles that might seem relevant. They might seem viable. And then that short list is actually going to change as you dive in deeper to the process. Cool. I'm going to keep going, but please do feel free to ask follow-ups on all of these. And yeah, let us know which of these mindsets you want to take forward with you in the chat if you're willing to share. If any of these sort of right-hand column sort of mindsets are helpful reminders for you that are resonating, things you want to take forward, we'd love to hear it. And I will, keep going as well, but please do let us know what you feel like you need to kind of remind yourself of. And this is just a nice reminder. This is actually from Wait But Why. I should have credited them here, but it's a great blog. And it's just a nice reminder that like you've gotten here to this point, but there's so many ways forward. And that's not meant to be overwhelming. It's just meant to show you that the act of doing exploration is your act of comparing options A, B, C, and D before you pursue any one of those journeys, right? So you can really look into them and explore your options. This is a nice, another visual from Wait But Why, and it just shows you how much time you're spending in your career. It just reminds us that it's worthwhile and important to really put due thought into it, right? So if Sylvia is mentioning an action plan, right? Think about how much time you're spending at work, and it's worth it for you to give yourself what you deserve, working on work that aligns with you and is interesting to you and meaningful to you, and suitable to your strengths. Again, when you just look at the sheer amount of time here, it just reminds us how important this work is to figure out where we belong professionally, right? Finding your room. I don't know if anyone's a Parks and Rec fan, but I like to think about career clarity. Like you're just gonna feel this click of like you're in the right place or you're not, and it's a pretty clear feeling one way or another. And so this is just a fun little example of really just knowing, when you're in the right team, the right environment, or not. And again, you can keep searching until you find that. So this framework is a super powerful framework that I love to go through. So I'll just sort of review it very quickly. If you are reflecting on past roles, what went well, what didn't go well, or you're trying to clarify for your future role, this 3-part framework is great. So the function is the day-to-day skills and activities of really what you would be doing throughout your job, throughout the week. And ideally, this is relevant to your affinities, your propensities, your strengths. The content is separate. So for example, if you're a data analyst, you could be analyzing data about finance or the environment or politics or education or any sort of content. Those are two totally separate things. Am I teaching what topic? Am I selling what product? Am I analyzing data about what, right? These are just two totally separate things. And then of course the work environment is the bells and whistles. What does it look and feel like? The size of the organization, the pace, the culture, the people, all that good stuff. And so these are the words we commonly hear, a job role, an industry or a field or a sector, and then the company culture. So when you break it down, I think sometimes people munge together those first two buckets. So when you're trying to really get clarity, you really want to feel clear in each of these 3 buckets of what makes the most sense for you. I'm just seeing Karina mention thinking in the short term, long term feels like a stretch. I think directing my efforts towards finding the next good job feels much more manageable. Yeah, it's way more manageable and it's like just more fun and engaging and it just makes more sense, right? But again, Karina, you want to think about where could that role lead me, right? If you're debating, I want to be a product manager or a project manager or a program manager, you can still ask people and say, what career paths, where do you take this in the future, and understanding the possibilities. But mostly focusing on the short term is usually a good way to go. And please tell us in the chat if anybody's resonating, which one of these 3 buckets is a current goal that you have of, which one stands out to you amongst the others of like the one that really needs a little bit more love, a little bit more TLC, a little bit more area for improvement in your career. If there's one of the 3 buckets that are standing out to you the most. Would love to hear it in the chat. And while you write that, I'm going to just forge forward here. So just to give you the definition, career exploration, it is a process that is separate from and a precursor to your job search. It includes steps of learning about the world and different jobs and reflecting and learning about yourself. When you do that, you're comparing, you're contrasting, you're clarifying which path makes the most sense for you to pursue. How do we go about that process? Number 1, commit. You got to ask yourself, am I ready to do exploration? Yes or no, right? Then you're going to reflect, and you're actually going to reflect in the same framework of what we just discussed. So you're really going to get to know what are your functional tendencies and strengths, what are the content areas that you're most interested in, problem areas you're most interested in, and then the work environment that aligns with you. Once you do that, you're going to narrow in on a few different roles and a few different industries that might seem relevant. They might seem viable for you. And of course, we can do online research, but I've never heard somebody who can just clarify their career path fully with online research alone. So what I like to do is network, which means setting up calls with people who are in your target roles and in your target companies, and really just painting a picture of what those jobs are really, really like. So you have to run those calls in a strong sort of creative, concrete way of asking really good questions to make sure you're getting what you need out of it and not just sort of cookie cutter, oh, what was your path, right? It's like you really want to prepare wisely for what to ask so that you come away with it feeling like you understand that job so much so that you could do it tomorrow. And then you go through a reflection process. So when you're reflecting, you're really saying, here's what I learned, here's what this means for me, here's what I like, here's what I don't like. And you keep doing this iterative journey to get closer and closer and closer and learn more about more and more of what's relevant to you. And that's how you eventually get to that clear prioritization of this role, this industry, this environment makes the most sense for me. That's when you can decide on upskilling, right? Don't just like say, oh, I should learn Excel or I should learn something random. It's like we want to learn skills that are most relevant to our goal and where it is we're headed. And then, of course, branding, we mentioned the story earlier, telling our story. The story becomes so much easier to tell, and the resume and the LinkedIn, so much easier to brand yourself when you know where you're headed. And of course, the job search as well, ideally comes sort of after all of this. So that is the quick process. This is just another way to visualize that. You can see how the sort of top portion is the self-reflection, and then the bottom is externally we're learning from other sources, other people around us. And when you do both of those things, that's really where the clarity comes into play. Timing, we talked about this a little bit, but I would sort of ask yourself, can I do this before my job search, or should I be doing this simultaneously to job search? Ideally, you do it before, right? It's going to make your job search more efficient, more effective, and really increase the odds you feel fulfilled with the job once you land it. So I would ask yourself, do I want to take a pause? Do I want to take a step back from my other career goals just to get some clarity? And a little bit goes a long way. If you were to spend a week or 2 or 3 just doing this and then revisit your other efforts, you'd be so surprised what you can learn in a short amount of time. And, again, this happens actually with every single job change. So if you change your job every few years, you want to go through a process of saying, what should be next for me? Right. And that process may be shorter in the future. Usually the first time you do this, it's a bit of a bigger ordeal if you're making a bigger change. But I would really ask yourself, like, should I take that step back, or can I sort of do this simultaneously? Feel free to share in the chat if you feel like you have a gut, response to this, or a game plan on whether you want to kind of take that step back, or you're sort of going to do it while you work on some other goals. But it is important to consider sort of how you go about this process. When you can do this independently of having any interviews, it's a really nice way to just make sure it's all about you and what you actually want versus what somebody else is asking of you. Okay. I always say, if you're not yet clear, more learning, more reflection. These are essentially the 2 ingredients. So really ask yourself, what do I need? Do I need to understand this better, or do I need to reflect on all the information I have? Sometimes a little bit of both. But when you do those 2 things, you will eventually get to that point of clarity. This is just a quick example of somebody who very successfully pivoted under our watch with our support. A teacher, a classroom teacher, went all the way to become a project manager, agile scrum master. Again, we went through the journey of exploring, what did she want, what's the best path, doing the upskilling, doing the branding, doing the job search, and then, advancing and getting, promoted along all the while, right? So this is just one example to show you that it's possible when you are methodical and logical with the steps and the phases that you kind of need to do, and just going one step at a time, you can really get where you're trying to go. Some other examples here of, big changes that, people can or have made in the past. You just want to be open-minded and give yourself what you deserve, which is time to explore and ask yourself what you want. This is just a bit of a bonus on job search. So if anybody is job searching, really ask yourself, are you being transactional? Are you checking the box? Or are you enjoying what conversations you'd enjoy having, with whom, about what? We sort of talked about that a little bit. Plugging away heads down. Job search requires a lot of different types of activities. So are you reflecting on where you're putting your time and how is it going? Am I seeing results? If I'm not seeing results, can I iterate on the approaches and the methods and the tactics that I'm using, right? So really be, self-aware and just measure what you're doing and how you're doing. And of course, the clarity is such a key piece. If you're applying to so many different types of roles, is that really serving you? And of course, are you networking? Networking is so important to our job search as well. And just try to make it fun, right? If you're enjoying these conversations, you're going to hopefully enjoy the job, right? If you're really kind of miserable in who you're talking to and what you're talking about, that might be a clue that those are kind of the wrong paths to pursue, right? So you really want to think about how you're feeling in the journey. And, as Meg already introduced, this is a lot of what we do here at Woken, guiding you through all of these many steps. So I will make sure, whoops, that you have all this information. I didn't mean to click that, but I'll make sure you have all of that. And that way we can all stay in touch in the future. And I'm happy to answer any and all questions at this point.
Heck yes. All right, let's start diving in. I know we covered a lot of ground, but y'all, if you have questions, if you want to dive in deeper on anything, please feel free. I've got my eyes in the channel, so please let us know if you want to dive in on anything specific. Okay, I thought this one was a good question in the vein of kind of like overcoming challenges. What strategies do you recommend for people to use if they need to overcome self-doubt when either taking on or trying to pursue roles that are outside of their comfort zone?
Yeah. So as you can see, the mindset is huge, right? Which you probably could tell already based on, many of these slides. The slides have to do with practical, but they have to do with ourselves, and we often hold ourselves back. So number one is like acknowledge if that's a feeling you're having, like label it, document it, write it down, speak it out loud. And that doesn't mean like you're speaking it into existence. You're just, I think a lot of people sometimes feel these negative feelings and then they just live with it. So when you sort of like call it into existence, you're saying, all right, this is something I need to like deal with, understand, and overcome. And it's a thing I can overcome, right? It's something I'm going to work on, right? And so you just start there. And then you want to get specific. So what are the actual doubts? Maybe you're like, you know what? This role requires skills A, B, C, and D. I only have some of these. I really need to upskill. Or maybe I don't know what level of skill they're looking for. Are they just looking for familiarity, or are they looking for a really deep expertise? Are they going to give me some technical interview? Like what level of knowledge is really required? So as you can see, usually the doubts usually pertain to questions of what we're not aware of, as like how we're going to be tested or who gets hired or what is expected. And so understanding more about those expectations is usually the key. And then when you have a deep understanding, you can say, do I want to upskill? Am I capable of that? Is that, like, for example, becoming a software developer for the first time? Yeah, you're probably going to need like a year of training, I mean, it's a big ordeal and there's boot camps for it. But when you learn about the training that's duly required for the path you're going after, you ask yourself, like, does that sound like fun? Like, does that sound like something I want to learn? And is that the amount of time and energy I want to take towards this path? The only reason you're going to go through such a big upskilling journey is if you know that that role is where you really want to lead in the future, right? So understand the role first and then understand how to get there. And then you can sort of decide, is that a journey I really want to take? But it's when it's outside your comfort zone, I just think like truly learning more, getting this deep understanding, getting this exposure, like, oh, what would that boot camp look and feel like? Let me talk to somebody that's done the boot camp before. Let me, really just get as much exposure as I need to feel like I get it. Like I can picture myself going through that. And now I know how that makes me feel. Either like I'm excited hearing about it, or I'm like, that is not right for me. And here's why, in which case, maybe it's slightly something different. Maybe it's a role that's like a little less technical, but still within tech, right? I mean, it could be any number of things, but by learning, you're going to figure out actually, you're going to get to that outcome. So I think you also have to have like some faith in the fact that, I will get there. And if I'm having a doubt, is that something I actually should like resolve and look into? And like, could that actually be a good thing? Like maybe this isn't the right fit for me, in which case we dodge a bullet, right? So I would just sort of entertain all the thoughts. Don't be like scared of them.
I think that's a good way to look at it. And I like that idea of like, okay, this is outside my comfort zone, but what about it is? Or like if I'm really nervous about this, like, okay, where is that? Like, where's that anxiety or where's that like concern landing? Is it on something that I can control, like upskilling and blah blah blah, or is it on, well, I hope they like me? Because like that's, that's never really kind of a good feeling for most people. And actually, as I was listening to you kind of go over some of these questions, I was thinking to myself, like, I also had very difficult time before I found a job that I really connected with, because it was constantly like I was basically just kind of guessing when I was trying to answer the questions that people would ask me, right? Because like I don't know where I want to go because I'm not super interested in, what did I sell? I sold basement finishing systems for a while. So like, you know what I mean? It's like, well, I can't really tell you why I'm passionate about it because I'm not really, but we don't all have that luxury of finding something that is going to, kind of tick all those boxes. So I
Right. I
like this
mean, but
idea.
I wouldn't think about it like, well, first of all, Meg, like you're now in a job that I think you love.
Oh, yeah, now
So,
it's, but
but
that's
I
the thing. It's
wouldn't
not
think
until
of
you
it like a
find it.
luxury. Like I would think of it like a journey. Like you got yourself here and anybody can do the same thing. But I love what you just mentioned. Like you want to notice, like if you're in an interview and you're like, I literally couldn't even fake this answer. Like you got to hear yourself when that happens. But and notice it, but it's and it felt like a luxury at the time probably
Oh
of like,
God, yeah.
but now look where you are. So it's always feasible, but I think notice where you are, notice those feelings, understand as much as you need to understand about where you want to go, and then you can sort of make it happen.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. Okay. How, let's see. When we're talking, we had a lot of people that wrote in with like specific situations, right? Like, let's talk about some of those. This person wanted to know if how they can get that career clarity when facing a career gap, especially with rapid technological changes. So when I was reading this question for me, I was looking at it as somebody who knows that they're going to have a gap coming up.
Mm.
So that was my take on it. Is that how you read the question, or do you kind of hear it in a different vein?
Yeah, I mean, anytime there's a gap, whether it already happened, whether it's coming up, I think what I'm hearing is like, how do I stay on top of my skills with a gap? Well, again, it depends why you need to have a gap. If you're like taking care of your health or your family, like sometimes you just need to do what you got to do. You can always sort of catch up later, ask yourself, like, can I sort of stay on top of things right now while I go through some personal journeys? Or is it something I can come back to later? But if you think about a gap, and technological advancements, like to me, my mind just goes to upskilling, which means how do we stay on top of these trends, AI, all the things that are changing. And if you're not working and you have a work gap, how do you stay on top of it? I think, of course, there's courses, there's certifications, even self-driven projects, right? So like ChatGPT came out and I was like, oh, I'm going to make a custom GPT of me. And I'm like, I don't know what that means, but like, I'm just going to go for it and like mess around and like see what happens, right? So I think not being scared of new technologies and finding support. Like I remember I tapped on a pretty technical mentor of mine and he was like, yeah, just like get ChatGPT and just start using it. And I was like, oh, great, perfect. Like you need people to kind of push you that have greater comfort. You could even shadow other people who know what they're doing. It depends on your field and which skill you want to stay on top of. But find ways, that will allow you to dabble. Like I think part of just technology is just like getting in there and just like trying it and doing our best. But if you're like a more somebody that learns in a structured formal way, a course or a certification or something like might feel more comfortable to you.
Okay, I like that answer.
I do see some
Um,
questions in the chat as well,
I
Meg.
know, I'm really excited.
Yeah, okay.
Freddie has one. Freddie wants to know, how difficult is it to find clarity after your 50s?
Yeah. It's a great question. I actually have helped people from high school through age 70. And so I wouldn't say it's difficult actually at all. I think it's the question of a lot of people say, like, is it too late to make a change and things like that? The ability to find clarity is absolutely there. It's just, give yourself the benefit of the doubt. What do I really want? And then you'll see, what do I want to do about it? Like, if it's a huge change, you're like, do I want to make this change or do I make some slighter, smaller version of it? In which case I still move in a good, better direction. Maybe it's not as big of a change as I would have hoped. But there are people that go back to school at any age. I mean, everybody's different with their barriers or their boundaries of like, oh, I don't want to do grad school. I don't want to do this. That's fine. So, but I would always say like, give yourself the benefit of the doubt, go through the exploration process, and then you see what do I want to do with this information, right? Like, can that even help me make a slight change forward that's in a good, better direction, right? I mean, the degree of the change that you make is really up to you, but I think everyone deserves to have clarity, right? So I don't think it's difficult to find the clarity. I think it's just a question of what do I want to do with this information now that I have it? How
Right.
relevant are my transferable skills? What would upskilling look like? Things like that. Um,
Yeah. Well, and I
and
like
then,
this question because generally speaking, when people ask questions like this, when we like dig in deeper on the question, a lot of time it is what you're saying. It's that like, can I actually do this? Is it too late? Right. And from my perspective, as somebody who's been working for 20 plus years, 23, 25, something like that, um, I am now 38 and I am way more clear than I ever was at any point prior to this.
Yeah.
So I would think of it less in terms of like, no, I can't do this, and more of a bit of a trade-off because like it's going to be not necessarily it's going to be hard to do this at any age. But if you're trying to get career clarity when you're like 20, it's not that you can't, but like you don't have a lot of life experience. So you haven't been exposed to a lot of situations where you might, have something happen and look at the situation and be like, this is not what I want. But you don't know that you might have that comes around later, right? Whereas later in life, yeah, it might be a little bit more of an arduous task, but there might be more layers involved to make big changes, but you know more about yourself. So I would see it as less of a like, oh no, I'm run out of time, and more of a like, no, 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 no. It should be a lot easier, or at least a lot more nuanced to figure
Yeah.
out what your
Totally.
your
You have
clarity
so
might
much
be.
more information under your belt, but even somebody more junior, I would say to definitely still go through. I mean, I agree with you, like you have less to reflect on as a somebody more junior in their career. But I still would do it because I'll see like college students who are debating, path A and path Z, and they're at like totally other ends of the spectrum. And I'm like, what the risk there is like people go to grad school or they take all this time and money and effort to pursue a career and then make such a hard pivot after investing so much into it. And so, when you're younger, I would say it's still so, so, so important. And what I would say is, even if it's like hard for you to feel crystal clear at a younger age, I always say you want to get in the right ballpark because, like, say you're like, I want to be in the marketing realm. There's so much in that, but at least you're like in the right universe versus like I'm on another planet here, right?
Yeah.
But yes, I know what you mean. And I do think when you get more tenured, yes, you have like so much more to reflect on. Absolutely.
Let's see. Chriselle had a question. How can someone that's feeling burned out begin working towards career clarity?
Yeah,
I
it's a good
like this
point.
question.
Yeah.
Burnout's intense, and
Yeah.
people sometimes treat it like, oh, well, I had the flu kind of thing. And it's like, no, 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 the flu used to kill people. Like, let's not discount this. Like, burnout's serious.
Yeah.
What would you tell Chriselle?
Yeah, it's a great question. Few things. Like one, try to like handle just the burnout like face value, like, whether it's self-care, whether it's boundaries, whether it's like, any number of things where you can try to just resolve it. Like if you're currently working and you're burned out, like what can we do about that right now? And then like truly it's kind of interesting because you could see it like, oh, I'm burnt out, I don't have energy to do this, but you could also see it as like this path isn't serving me, and so it almost can give you that momentum to say there's clearly something else out there that would be a better fit. That all being said, burnout can come from a lot of different reasons, so I would ask yourself, role, industry, environment. Like, is my role really not serving me in terms of the day-to-day activities that I'm doing? Or is it like my manager, my company culture, my hours, I'm working in person, I'm commuting, like things like that. So I would really diagnose like what the issue is actually. And part of that is going through career exploration. So career exploration is probably one of the healthiest things that you can do to figure out like what do I need and what's right for me, right? So it's kind of the answer to the burnout, to be honest. But again, I would still put in place some near-term solutions and tactics just to make sure you're taking care of yourself, obviously is step number one. But I would just see it as an opportunity to find a path that is more fitting or is more suitable. But again, I would just keep in mind like sometimes burnout is just like the hours of this job or the culture of this company or like certain nuances that way too. Sometimes people are like, I love this role, but this company I'm overworked. Like what if I did the same role somewhere else that actually just supported balance? So that's where you have to diagnose like what is really going on for me specifically.
Yeah, yeah. All right, let's see. We've got some more questions coming in. Oh, Mary also chimed in saying, I think it is a good idea to present career clarity to younger people too. What people don't understand is that being young people, they're being bombarded with a lot of information, and any kind of clarity they can gain counts. And that's huge. I think you're right. It is something like instead of planning for the rest of your life, think more about the macro of like where do you want to be. I think I'm loving all of this advice here.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see. Alina had a good question. How do you evaluate the culture of a workplace when some aspects may be more hidden? I feel like companies will often tout that they are strong proponents of accessibility, DEIB, et cetera, but it can vary by department.
Yeah, totally. Few things. Like number one, I like to chat with people at the company who are not involved with my interview process. I think you can get like a more honest take that way. Um, and I would just like say you get to offer stage and you didn't have a lot of time to ask questions. I would just like set up more chats with whoever, whether it's hiring manager or peers and colleagues that you even haven't yet met through the interview process or HR. I would just like set up as many extra calls that you need. Like once you have an offer in your hand, get all your questions answered. So be comprehensive and be creative and concrete in how you phrase those questions. So instead of just saying, do you support like accessibility or like, do you support this thing? I would just be like, I would actually ask for stories the
How
way
do you
that
support?
yeah, right. Not and not even just how, like, they say to you, tell me about a time when you. So I would say, tell me about a time when you had like an employee on the team that dealt with this and what did you do about it? Like, or I would do like a lot of like tell me about a time. And then when they tell you stories, you then determine what that means to you. Because either you're going to hear some like fluffy, vague answer and you're going to be like, okay, clearly they just like don't have a process, or you're going to be like, they just told me some very specific things, some like, it was super, on point. They told me multiple stories. It had all these details. Like, clearly, this is something they do time and time again. So you want to kind of read between the lines of what you're hearing and even their tone. If somebody's like giving you all the specifics, you're going to know, like, do I believe them? And if they're like fluffy and they dance around it, you're going to be like, okay, they clearly don't have an answer. So ask for stories, get data points, get specifics, and then just like sort of interpret what you're hearing, I would say. And you determine the culture based on that, right? Don't just say like, what's your culture? Like, does that make sense?
Yeah, like ask, there's a way to ask the questions that leaves them open-ended enough to like kind of give them the space because you're not going to like you want to ask the question and then listen to the response. Listen, don't just listen to what they say, but how they say it, right? If you're like, "Hey, do you have any business resource groups or, employee resource groups at this company?" and their answer is no, is the answer like I really wish you wouldn't talk about this. No, let's talk about something else. Or is the answer no? But if that's something, if you were to join our team, is that something that you'd be interested in being a part of? If you are concerned about, I tend to use like parents as a good one for this, but like if you're a working parent, single or otherwise, ask how they support working parents. Then you can also ask, like, hey, is there somebody on the team that I can talk to who's like from that ERG? Or if they don't have them, like, oh, can I talk to somebody who's a working parent for you? There should not be a problem if you ask to speak to somebody who is outside the interview process, but within that company, especially if all you're asking for is information. So, like,
Yeah.
pay attention to the tone. Mary's completely right. Interview them right back. But, like, absolutely, like, ask the questions and then just sit and wait. You don't have to fill the silence. They are supposed to. They're the ones that need to be telling you about things.
Yeah. I love
Mary's
that.
also chiming in here. Sometimes these companies do not walk their talk. Talk with as many company employees as possible. Go to the in-person and virtual company events. Read about the company and their reputation and process.
Yeah,
Yeah.
reading online sometimes is a little tough just because, there might be like the one bad review, obviously. But you
Yeah.
can read, but the conversations I would say are key. And also like, what you guys said is it will vary per team and per manager. And so as much as you can read online, see how you're feeling. Like in the interview process, if you just met multiple people, like how did that go? Like it's okay to judge like, oh, there were some yellow flags, there were some red flags, or you know what, I loved everybody I met. And like just and if you're really not sure how to interpret, get another pair of eyes and ears. If you're not sure, like, is this a red flag? I'm not sure if I'm overthinking it or, whatever it may be, go to a coach, a mentor, a peer, and just say, like, here's what I'm hearing. And what do you sort of think about it? And you kind of just want to find somebody objective who has no skin in the game, but somebody who can just like help you figure out what you're feeling and like, is that, something you're overthinking or like maybe the way they phrased it actually is concerning. So if you're not sure, getting another sort of perspective can help.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's see here. Good question. I know we had another one that came through and I wanted to make sure we didn't miss it. No, that might have been it. Okay. All right. Keep coming, y'all. If you got questions, go ahead and ask them. We probably got time for about one more. Let me pull something from our pre-sub list here. Choosing purpose. Okay. How important is theoretical knowledge versus practical skills in career development?
Hmm. Interesting. Okay. Theoretical versus practical.
This person
Um,
gave the example of of being in software engineering.
mm-hmm. Interesting. Yeah. Well, look, I think you kind of need to know both. I mean, in software engineering, it's like a pretty particular example where you're gonna have to understand what are certain methods or concepts, what are they used for, why, how, when, where, what types of technologies, what types of apps do they apply to. So situationally, I think like it shows you're more strategic and you know like what tools used are used when, and then the practical is like how do I implement, right? So I actually think they're both probably very important, but it depends on the level of your role and the expectations. Like if you're a junior developer, like, okay, maybe they're not expecting you to make every strategy choice. So I think the theoretical and the strategy, gets more important as you get more senior and you might oversee a team. They're going to be doing the implementation and the execution. So I would just look at like exactly the level of the role, the type of role, and what's really expected for you. You don't like, again, if you're junior, you don't need to come all in hot being like, oh, I understand and I create every strategy under the sun. Maybe that would look like overstepping. So just really understanding kind of, I would say, what makes sense for your level, your role, and sort of start there. And if you're not sure, obviously networking is a great way to gut check, do I have the right level of knowledge here?
Yeah. Okay. I like this. All right, last question I have for you. How can we effectively tell our story during job interviews, especially if we are newer in our field?
Yeah.
I was thinking of like people who are either like fresh out of school or maybe pivoting into something new, but like
Yeah.
what how do you tell a story if your story in this area is hopefully just beginning?
Right. That's a great question. I mean, it depends if they're asking you, like, walk me through your resume, in which case, even if you're like an undergrad, you might still have some experiences up until this point. But if you're doing like the tell me about yourself, I like to do background, strengths, direction. Again, background can be like some high level areas of expertise, a few key skills, maybe some industries you've been exposed to. Strengths, this is a great way to actually just describe like what you think you're good at, right? It's an opportunity to, especially for somebody more junior, like where do you think you shine? What is it you kind of want to work on? And then direction, you get to actually part of your story is like where do you kind of want to go? What are the roles and industries and work that you're excited to pursue, especially the more junior you are. It's all about, what do you really want to do? Actually, they want to train you. And so they want to know that you want to be there, really, and then once you get a little older, it's like, have you done this before? Right. So in the early days, it's nice to know that you like understand what the role will expect and like why do you think it's the right fit for you? Why are you interested? Honestly, is probably more important. And soft skills, like how do you collaborate with other people? How do you like escalate when there's an issue? I mean, they're going to ask you more about just how you like operate and work in general. But just knowing that you're interested, I think is kind of half the battle there.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is also a time where, like, if you're starting out at the beginning of your career journey in whatever way that presents to you, so you don't really have a lot to like, show them of like, here's what led me here. You can also use it, like, come at that story from the perspective of like, here's why this is an important step that I need to take on the journey. I
Yeah.
think this will get me to the next spot, or here's what I want to do, and here's why your company is, a linchpin in that progress that I want to make, or something like that.
Yeah.
Like you can lay out the future story you want to be telling and
Yeah.
how they fit into it if you are just so at the beginning that there's not a lot that you can refer to of like, here's what led me here.
Yeah.
So,
For
yeah.
sure. Yeah.
All right, Rachel, 1 minute left. Tell us all about Woken. What do you want us to take with us when we leave? I'm going to show up your page on the like share the page again with everybody. But what information do you want them to take with you today about Woken?
Yeah, I mean, we have a ton of free resources. If you sign up on our email list, we do free webinars pretty much every single month. And our resources page has a ton of blogs, videos, meditations, quizzes, downloadable resources, things like that. And yeah, we always offer a free one-on-one call if you want to chat further about you and your career and how you're doing. But yeah, we're here to help. And, I understand this stuff can be stressful and daunting, but, we're here for you. And you're doing the right thing just by taking one step forward of even thinking about your career. So you're doing the right thing by being here, and just keep getting support, whether it's peer, mentor, coach, whoever it may be. And giving it the time it deserves, you'll get there. I think a lot of people just we stress about it and then we just like hope it'll all work out. Like give it 30 minutes a week or even an hour a month or whatever it may be, and you'll be surprised what that can do.
Yeah, absolutely. Every drip makes a puddle, right?
It
All
does.
right, y'all. That has brought us to the end of time today. I want to say a massive thank you to everybody who joined us. Whether you were able to stay for the full session or we lost you along the way, we are so incredibly grateful for you for spending time with Power to Fly and Woken today. Whether this was your first Power to Fly event or your 50th, I sincerely hope it will not be the last. I hope that y'all go out and have the day that you deserve. Enjoy the rest of your week, weekend, all of that kind of good stuff. And I hope that we will see you back here sooner rather than later. Bye, y'all.